Welcome to Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Today, we're joined again by Glyn Ford. Glyn was with us just about a year ago. We welcome him back to Asia in Review. Glyn served 25 years in the European Parliament and became very conversant with Asian affairs. He traveled during that period of time and still frequently travels to Asia. In fact, he just came back from North Korea. He also has a book that actually came out a few years ago about North Korea. It's called North Korea on the Brink, Struggle for Survival. Well, North Korea is on everybody's mind these days as we see the leadership changes that are going on in the country, and we want to try to get some insight from Glyn about what's going on in that often mysterious country. Welcome back to Asian Review. It's great to have you. Well, now you just came back from North Korea. Was it 2 months ago? You said?
Two months ago I was there.
And you're headed back again.
I will be there again at the second half of August.
Second half of August, so that's just right around the corner. Is this your first visit to North Korea since Kim Jong Un has been elevated?
Yeah, the one 2 months ago was, yeah. We were originally due to go actually in March, but that was postponed because of, well, firstly there was 100 days of mourning, and then there were the celebrations of the 100th anniversary of the birth of Kim Il-sung. So that meant that there were no foreign sort of political delegations in North Korea till the beginning of May, and in fact we went in on May the 15th, and we were probably the first Western delegation into North Korea after the accession of Kim Jong Un.
Wow, exciting time to be there, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, it's changing. I mean, whether for the better or worse is something that can be discussed, but certainly it's clear that something's going on there. Pyongyang is enormous amounts of money being spent in Pyongyang. Clearly, that predated the death of Kim Jong-il and the accession of Kim Jong Un. But there's 100,000 new apartments being built. The skyline's changing. You've got certainly the markets are very busy. You need money, of course, to be able to spend in the market, but if you've got the money, almost anything you want available. There's a lot more cars on the streets, and the whole world in Pyongyang is phoning, texting, and sending pictures to each other on their new mobile phones.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Close to 1 million mobile phones now in North Korea.
Wow. So, do I hear there's an economic boom going on in North Korea?
Well, I mean, it seems to me what's happening is that a lot of effort's being made to keep, if you want, the population in Pyongyang feeling good about itself.
In Pyongyang or the rest of North Korea?
Oh, no, in Pyongyang. I mean, Pyongyang is the place everybody wants to get to go to. You can only move to Pyongyang with permission. You don't get the right to. It's a bit like the old Soviet Union, and certainly in the past when I've been out stopping in places like Wonsan, which is on the one of the big cities on the east coast, in hotels. I mean, the waitresses were giving their pictures to the Korean guys who were with us to show to their young friends in Pyongyang. Life is better in Pyongyang, and they're building theaters and new entertainment. There's a fun fair that's opened recently. There's a new one being built.
Fun fair? What is a fun fair?
Fun fair, roller coaster.
Oh yeah. I've read about that. Yeah.
There's a fairly new fun fair, and there's a new one being opened in the Daejung River on an island. So there's going to be another fun fair, water park, and a dolphinarium.
Now, are these all being built by North Koreans, or are these being built by like Chinese or other folks?
Well, they've been built by North Koreans, but I guess they bought in the technology. I mean, I guess I don't know, to be perfectly honest, but certainly the fun fair that's open near the Arc de Triomphe opened about 18 months, 2 years ago. That apparently is mainly Italian technology.
Wow. So, There is this image that seems to be coming out in the press that North Korea is lightening up. It's under Kim Jong Un or the new leadership, whoever exactly that might be, that it's trying to mellow its image. And you certainly seem to be suggesting that.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think, I mean, if I had to summarize what's happening, firstly, from about 2008, we've seen the revival of the party. The party had been allowed to wither and die a little.
Yeah.
As you had a charismatic leader in Kim Jong-il. Clearly, Kim Jong Un, who's 28, 29, 30, is not going to be a charismatic leader for a while yet. And so I think Kim Jong-il recognized that, and in 2008 started the process of reviving the party. And in 2009, 2010, you saw a renewal of the party.
Was there Chinese influence on that? I've heard some speculation the Chinese were putting some pressure on North Korea to, let's get the party going again. Let's ramp up the party.
Maybe, but I mean, it's got a logic to it because, as I said, I think it's very difficult for Kim Jong Un to be a charismatic leader. He clearly is the leader, but I think it would be easier for him to be speaking on behalf of an institution than on his own behalf. And speaking on behalf of the party, I think serves that purpose very well. My own view, for what it's worth, is Kim Jong Un is clearly the first amongst equals, but it's more of a collective leadership. When I was there a couple of months ago, people talked more, not all the time, but more about the leadership rather than the leader. But that's not to make it, he is the leader. But I think there's a collection of family and friends around him that is fulfilling that task, and that's within the party, within the Politburo, within the military, and within, if you want, the ministries.
You said people talk about the leadership as opposed to the leader. Who is people in this case?
The people I was talking to in North Korea. When I was there, we met with the Vice Foreign Minister, we met with the Speaker of the Supreme People's Assembly, we met with the trade people in the Trade Ministry and the State Investment Council, a whole variety of places.
Yeah, so you're dealing with people that are in pretty high positions.
Oh yeah,
ahead of the
we met.
Supreme
The Politburo has got about a dozen members. We met 2 members of the Politburo.
That's very interesting, and I mean, and you've been going to North Korea for quite some time.
Yeah. I've been going. The first time I went was '97, so I've been going, for 15, 16 years now.
Interesting. I mean, you're getting kind of access a lot of people that go to North Korea don't get.
Oh yeah, I mean, and as I said, I mean, we would. I would normally expect to see someone at Politburo level when I went there. I tend to deal with the international department of the party, and the new head of the international department, Kim Yong, Y-O-N-G rather than Il. Is a member of the former Vice Foreign Minister, member of the Central Committee, Secretary to the Central Committee, alternate member of the Politburo.
Now, why did they extend to you such access?
Firstly, as a member of the European Parliament, I was very active on the issue of North Korea. I was a member of in fact, helped set up the European Parliament's delegation with the Korean Peninsula. We actually have a standing delegation in the European Parliament between the European Parliament and North and South Korea. And that delegation travels to the peninsula probably around once a year, maybe twice a year, and will go, to North and South Korea very often, sometimes just to the south, but very regularly. And so I was involved in that process, and I'm still active in the British Labour Party. I'm no longer a member of the European Parliament, but I'm on the equivalent, it's called the National Policy Forum, but I'm on the equivalent of the Labour Party's Central Committee in North Korean terms.
You ran for Parliament, didn't you, on one occasion, as I recall?
Yeah, a long time ago. I mean, my interest is in the European Parliament, and I may well run again in 2014.
For the European Parliament?
Yeah.
You miss it?
Oh, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing to do.
Yeah.
Whether I'm going to get elected is a different issue, but
So what kind of things do the Koreans want to talk about, or at least the North Koreans want to talk about in your most recent visit?
oh well, I mean, they're clearly in favour of they want to talk about improving relations with the European Union, because I'm from the European Union. They see the European Union as an opportunity. In fact, some of the editorials a few years ago in Rodong Shimun were saying that the European Union was the only hegemonic power capable of challenging the United States. I think that may have shifted a little now. Although, I mean, clearly with the emergence of China,
I was going to suggest they overlooked China.
well, the problem is with, I mean, North Korea and China have very good. They have better relations than anybody else, but they're still not perfect. There's a certain tension between North Korea and China, and certainly a couple of years ago it was the North Korea-China Year of Friendship, and I was told by people in the Chinese embassy that it was a fairly frosty year of friendship. So I think one shouldn't get the impression that North Korea is a wholly owned subsidiary of, if you want, the People's Republic of China. It's not, but they clearly have good relations. Yeah, they also want to talk about investment. I mean, there's a big push on investment. They see that as a solution. About 18 months ago, they set up a new state investment and joint venture commission, which took power from both the Prime Minister's office and from the Ministry of Foreign Trade to set up this new commission, which is about trying to bringing investment to the special economic zones. There's basically two models.
Is Chinese investment or
investment
from anywhere?
They want investment from Europe and elsewhere. I mean, they've got two models of special economic zone. You've got the kind of empty model, which is Kaesong, the Kaesong industrial complex with the south, where you've got a patch of land where you have South Korean technology and management, and every day, at the moment, 40,000 North Koreans come in there to provide labour. So land and labour from the north, technology and management from the south. Everybody comes in, works, then certainly the North Koreans go home again. Now that's in trouble at the moment, partly because of North-South Korean relations. Whether that's going to change after the election of the new president in Seoul, we don't know. But the other model they have is up in Rasong, which is Raijing Songbong, where you've actually got a more like the Chinese model, where you've got an area that's fenced off with a population in there, and that population lives there. And what they want to do is to bring in factories from China, fine, but they particularly like to get from Europe and elsewhere.
They don't want to be as dependent on China as they.
No, they
are.
would like to, if you want, multi-source their dependency rather than be entirely dependent on China. And one of the problems with the new South Korean approach, which they're perfectly entitled to have, but it's sort of frozen out the North Koreans. It's led to an enormous influx of Chinese influence into the north. So if Seoul doesn't want to play ball, fine, Beijing does, and there are thousands and thousands of Chinese, and if you go to the markets without inspecting every item, most of the goods in the market are Chinese, which are for sale.
China has a large lease on northeastern North Korea, doesn't it? Along some of those places you mentioned, the Raison port, and there's another port I can't think of the name right now. Chongjin, I think it is.
Well, Rasing Songbong, or Rasong as they call it now, is a special economic zone. They also, I mean, China's also got some access to, if you want, to places like Chongjin, because of course there's no port there, because the Russian border comes down and meets with North Korea. It's a very short border, but actually technically, if the Chinese are sailing down the Tumen River, they're actually going into North Korean and Russian waters to access the sea.
China has a lot of leases, long-term leases on mines in North Korea, I also understand.
Yeah, I mean, North Korea's got. I mean, I'm a geologist actually, but I've not had much opportunity to. I've been to a couple of coal mines, but not much else. But I mean, North Korea's got enormous mineral wealth. It's got a lot of coal. It's got things like gold, silver, and most interestingly, rare earths. Where of course the Chinese would like, I suspect, to lock North Korea into a consortium, because if North Korean rare earths started to access the market separately, it would make it very difficult for China to, if you want, up the prices and keep control where it has at the moment.
That's interesting. I've always known that North Korea has a lot of minerals of various kinds, and I mean that was an attraction to the Japanese during colonialism, wasn't it? Because a lot of their steel mills were built right there in the north.
Oh yes, you have to, because I mean you don't build steel mills, a long way away from where you've got the ore and the fuel.
But I hadn't heard before that North Korea has rare earths. But that is really interesting. Do the North Koreans know how to play the Chinese?
Well, they seem to be doing okay. I'm not saying it's perfect, but they're not doing badly. I mean, North Korea's played a comparatively weak hand rather well since 1947 to date.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think most other people would too. Well, when I say play, I have this notion that. Well, the North Koreans don't really like the Chinese that much, but they're kind of stuck with them.
Yeah, I mean, we need to get it balanced. There is a view often expressed in the U.S. that that North Korea is basically a wholly owned Chinese subsidiary, and we really should get tough with the Chinese and tell them they've really got to sort this out, because we know they essentially run the place and it's all up to them.
I don't buy that.
No, absolutely not. But I mean. Equally, it's not that they hate each other, but there's a certain tension. China's the elephant in the room, and North Korea, doesn't want to get stepped on by the elephant. So yes, there's a certain distance there, but they're not enemies, but they're not best friends either.
Don't the North Koreans know how to play on Chinese fears? For example, say, well, you don't want to help us. Okay, I guess you want to see the American Army on the Tumen River.
Yeah, except that, of course, the North Koreans, that's implicit. The North Koreans aren't going to say that. I mean, the North Koreans aren't going to say they're in danger of collapsing. But I mean, the Chinese certainly prefer to have the Chinese does not want a unified Korea run by, if you want, the South and run by the South and the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, unification, I think, is a long way off. And certainly the North Koreans are very much opposed to the notion of, if you want, German-style unification. At the moment, I think in terms of the next generation, the model that they're looking at probably will be closer to not Germany, but maybe Ireland. I mean, the Irish peace process, it's very different, but it's got some elements. The Irish peace process allowed two entities to live together in peace separately.
But one is still part of the UK.
Well, yeah, but fine. But there were people who wanted to talk about Northern Ireland becoming part of the South.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a perfect analogy. What I'm saying is, it seems to me that the kind of thinking that's going on in terms of the next couple of generations is to actually have a peace process where the two grow together separately, rather than any, if you want, urgent unification. And certainly, from a North Korean point of view, absolutely not unification by absorption, a la East Germany into West Germany.
The other day, I was talking to someone. Actually, it was a South Korean, and he felt any kind of unification, or whatever kind, is probably 20 years into the future.
I think the North Koreans would agree. I mean, I think what they want is the space, as I said, to grow together. And at the moment, there's a recognition in the North that the northern economy is too weak to actually compete. And so they need the space to, they certainly wouldn't want to follow the Chinese model, but in a sense do a China, You know, if you could get the investment in there, there's absolutely no reason why North Korea can't go back to growing at 10-12% a year, like it actually did in the in the 60s.
I mean, it was a very ahead of South Korea.
Yeah. Until probably around, I think the official estimates from the CIA put North Korea ahead of South Korea in economic terms until the early 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a real success story. The problem was, in a sense, the classic failure to actually be able to shift. The same problem with the Soviet Union, but actually have to shift from heavy industry to light industry. They did the steel, coal, cement generation worked perfectly. What the problem was shifting from that into, if you want, light industry, consumer durables, and the rest, and that transition never really was made. And it was one of the problems with the Soviet Union as well. They never really made that transition either. Whereas the Chinese managed that,
right.
And we've seen where it's gone.
They went into like consumer goods and that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a difficult transition to make, but I mean, it's the Chinese demonstrated it can be made, and in a different sense. Probably so does Vietnam. I mean, no one's worried about the economic collapse of Vietnam or China these days. Maybe Cambodia, Laos, Cuba might be in different situations, though Cambodia seems to do reasonably well at the moment in terms of its economy and
textiles and that
yeah. Looking at that kind of model, there's absolutely no reason why the North could not follow those kind of models, but it needs the space. And it needs the removal of kind of the threat, because at the moment, who apart from family South Koreans, maybe under a different president or neighbours, China is going to put money into North Korea. I mean, you might get the odd Japanese, probably not. European company, but you're certainly not going to get mass investment. The risk is too high.
Oh, right.
I mean, why would you go there when China's next door? And I mean, North Korea is cheaper than China for production, but not that much cheaper unless you don't need much technology. I mean, you certainly wouldn't want to park tens of millions of euros of technology in North Korea, where if something goes wrong, you may lose the whole thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
But mining may be different. Mining is the possibility, in the sense that, I mean, there clearly at the moment are quite serious attractions to mining, and you don't really need for a lot of the mining you don't really need state-of-the-art equipment. You can use second-hand Chinese coal technology would work fine in North Korea.
Are there North Korean students studying in British universities that you know of?
Yeah. I mean, not very many, but there's, I think, 3 at Cambridge. There's a couple in London.
University of London.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, interestingly, I mean, one of these students in Cambridge just sort of turned up. I mean, they're not on a scholarship or anything. So yeah, we don't have very many, but yes, we do have North Koreans.
In other European countries, are there North Korean students that you know of?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a breakdown of every student at every university, but certainly there are. I mean, you're probably talking about dozens, maybe maybe 100, maybe 150 across Europe. You're not talking about vast numbers, but yes. There are North Korean students in EU universities and colleges.
I've heard there's a handful of North Korean students in American universities. I don't know which universities. I have a suspicion, and this is pure suspicion. The University of Georgia, which in a way seems to be a bit off the map, but has a very well-known Korean-American Korea specialist. And I know for some time he's advocated North Korean students coming to the United States to study. And what they study seems to be economic issues, economics.
Oh, certainly we are trying to encourage them. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of enthusiasm for North Koreans doing nuclear physics. It's more business studies and...
Yeah, that's funny. Interesting. Now, Kim Jong-il. How do you think history will look back on him?
depends how far ahead and whose history.
Who's writing the history?
I mean, who's writing it from what perspective? I mean, but certainly when he took over, around that period, I mean, the forecasts were that North Korea was on the verge of collapse. I mean, it was days, weeks, months away. That didn't happen. So in that sense, Kim Jong-il played a good hand. North Korea now, I mean, even prior to the last sort of 12 months, it looks very different from when I first saw it in the late 90s. I mean, I think it's because they privileged people in Pyongyang. I mean, the countryside, and I wasn't in the countryside on my last visit, 'cause I was only there for 4 or 5 days. But certainly all the evidence is that the countryside's a different world. Pyongyang is a reasonably sophisticated, reasonably well-off capital city with cars, markets, entertainment, the rest.
Entertainment, nightclubs?
Well, I mean, you've got karaoke bars. Yeah, I mean, I've been in karaoke bars there. You've got restaurants, you've got theatres, classical music, all of that, cinema, the rest. Whereas if you want to add in the countryside, it's a different world.
Pretty rustic.
I mean, it's pretty rustic there. Although the situation, in my view, generally the situation isn't too bad in the countryside. The people who are suffering most are the people in the big sort of industrial cities, particularly up in the northeast, where, I mean, there's, because of the topography, you've got mountains sort of very close to the sea. You've got no hinterland for growing food. Very little of the machine. Very few of the factories are working. I was up in Hamhung last year. I was in Hamhung, I think, about 9 years ago, as well. It's a bit better than it was 9 years ago. There's a bit more happening, but it's still. There's still mile after mile of sort of smokestacks, pipes and chemical plants that show little evidence of working very in a very serious way, even if they've got one or two of the plants going again, in terms of the heavy machinery plants, the fertilizer plant, the Vinalon factory.
Well, as you know, recently, there was a big shakeup in North Korea. Ri Yong-ho, if I'm saying his name correctly, the top military person, marshal, vice marshal, I guess, was his real title, was purged.
Well, and officially he retired, but yes, I think most people would imagine that his retirement wasn't on grounds of ill health.
And it was said, I'm just wondering what your reaction to this was, that, as you said, it was for health, that Kim Jong Un, or those close to him, like his uncle, Jong Il, would just realize the country had to get on an economic track of development, and the military actually controlled the economy, or at least significant parts of the economy.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's like the Chinese model. Sorry, the North Koreans don't like being compared with China, but I mean, you've actually got a situation where, and in China now, I mean, there are certainly big Chinese companies that are, that are selling around the world that are very close to the army. In North Korea, you've got You've got army operations, you've got party operations, you've got local government operations. They're all there. I mean, I like buying North Korean art. I mean, the different galleries in Pyongyang. Some are close to the army, some are close to the ministry. There are connections there.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not entirely strange. I mean, but I think at the moment, I mean, as I said, I mean, Pyongyang is being privileged in terms of standard of living, which will while that continues, I think it will certainly allow Kim Jong Un to consolidate his position. But in the meantime, there's got to be an attempt to, if you want get the economy going. And at the moment, the focus seems to be on the special economic zones. But how successful those are going to be depends.
That's a reflection of the Chinese model, isn't it? Because that's one of the key elements that China used to sort of get things going.
It's a model that's used all over the world, frankly. I mean, it's used in parts of Africa and Latin America. They're called slightly different things, but you get tax exemptions and the rest. But yes, so I mean, I'm aware of how much the North Koreans don't like being compared to China, but yeah, certainly certainly in terms of wanting to get growth, yes, that's a growth model that's worked in a large variety of places, including in China.
Let me ask you this now. How many times have you been to North Korea, would you say? You probably lost count by this point.
Yeah, I've been 20, 25.
That was going to be my guess. You've been in people's houses, I suspect?
Yeah, I mean, but you don't get
have to know people.
Yeah, you don't get easy access to people's houses. But yes, I mean, I've been virtually everywhere. I mean, in the sense of I've been in hospitals, both Western style and traditional medicine style. I've been in coal mines. I've been in a whole variety of factories. A factory in Pyongyang where they were making suits with Italian names for the Japanese market with "Made in China" labels.
Tell us about. Just to add a little bit of a human element here to what we're saying, tell us about some of the houses you've been in, what they look like.
Oh well, I mean,
what kind of facilities do they have?
I mean, I've been in the farming areas. I've been into a couple of houses. I mean, in American terms, they'd be extremely basic, but they're clean, tidy. I mean, and like Japan, I mean, rooms are used for living in and sleeping in. Okay. In the traditional Japanese homes, you roll out the futon. They're comparatively small. They've got, I mean, certainly electricity and running water generally, but electricity not all the time. I mean, outside of Pyongyang, where there are very few signs of power cuts these days, but outside of Pyongyang, most people probably get electricity for 3 or 4 hours a day. You don't get it, it's not there all the time. Yeah.
And this would be even in a so-called fancier place in Pyongyang? You get that 3 or 4 hours of electricity?
No, in Pyongyang you get it all the time. Outside of Pyongyang.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. So
outside of Pyongyang, you don't get the. I mean, I'm told. I mean, certainly, people who live there permanently or semi-permanently, diplomats and aid workers and the rest. I mean, the general view is that most people outside of Pyongyang, probably outside of some of the other cities, but you're on 3 or 4 hours electricity a day and.
Wow, it's hard for us to believe, isn't it? Hard for most people in America and Britain to just fathom that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's amazing. But on the other hand, I mean, my grandmother's house in England didn't have. We weren't connected to the sewerage system. That was when I was a child.
Right. Okay. I don't know what we should say, the fancier places in Pyongyang, did they all have, what do the Koreans call that? The
ondol.
Yeah, they have that ondol heating.
Some of them do, but I mean most of them. I mean, Korea was left with a blank slate essentially in 1953. In that in Pyongyang there were barely more than 2 buildings standing. So it's been built in a kind of Soviet-style model of big apartment blocks. So most people live in apartments. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but you're in a 10, 12, 20-story apartment block. And there are certain areas of the city. I mean, there's a closed area of the city very close to the Korea Hotel, which is the party area, I go in there for meetings with party officials. But I mean, it's you go through a checkpoint to get into the party area. There's another area over the other side of the Daejung River, which is the military area, and again you go through a checkpoint to get into the military zone. So,
Have you been on any North Korean military facilities, the military bases?
well, only down in Panmunjom.
Oh, okay.
I've been down.
Okay.
Oh well, I went a couple of years ago. I went the other side. Going down to Panmunjom is a classic tourist trip.
Right.
Which is it's,
From both
it's,
sides.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I've been there both sides. I think I've been from the north about 5 times, from the south 3.
Okay.
So I keep looking for recognize people. But a couple of years ago, I went down the east coast, all the way down from Wonsan down to the border, which is going into Mount Kumgang. And that was interesting because down there you got to see the military in a very different sense, because you go down to Panmunjom, you just see them when you arrive.
Right.
But as we're going down the east coast, certainly from about 60 kilometers out of the border, I mean, you literally had military checkpoints every 2 kilometers.
Now,
And we were in a convoy. There were us, and then there was the Ministry of Unification either side of us, and there were 2 KPA cars, a convoy of 6, and so we were going straight through. But yeah, anybody going down there who's not being escorted is struggling to get anywhere.
Let me just interject a point here for the benefit of our audience. By the way, you're watching Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is Mr. Glyn Ford. Mr. Ford served 25 years in the European Parliament and became known as an Asian expert. He had many, many dealings with Asia over the years. He's written a book, which we've also sort of touched on here, called North Korea on the Brink, Struggle for Survival. He mentioned Mount Kumgang, and Mount Kumgang is a very interesting sort of, I guess it's a feature of North Korea, South Korea politics. It's a very famous historic site just on the other side of the North Korean border, just across from South Korea. It was open to the South Korean public a few years ago and very popular for South Korean tourists. And then there was an unfortunate incident where a North Korean soldier shot and killed a South Korean woman tourist. To the best of my knowledge, it's not open to tourists again yet, is it? Or they've talked about it?
Sorry, the South Koreans have closed access to Mount
The South
Kumgang.
Koreans have, okay.
And say that they won't reopen the access until they get some explanation about the shooting of the tourist who was wandering around in an out of bounds area at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning. But yes, I mean, it was a tragedy that she was shot. But apparently, I was down there when I was there 2 years ago. There was nobody there. I mean, I've been there from the south, and so I went down, and it was empty. We were the only people around. But apparently, since then, it's now been open to Chinese tourists, and so there are boatloads of Chinese being brought down to visit. It is claimed.
Down the eastern coast?
Yeah.
And then they offload there. How are you received in South Korea? I mean, you're obviously very friendly with the North Koreans. Do the South Koreans
well, it depends who
welcome
the
you
South Koreans,
as warmly?
It depends who the South Koreans are. I mean, certainly one of the reasons I got interested in North Korea was that I was teaching at the University of Tokyo back in the early 80s and asked by an American friend of mine married to a South Korean to go and visit this man in jail under house arrest, Kim Daejung, and went and visited him. And I knew him and had contact with him for 25 years. I mean, it was one of 2 Westerners invited to 2 Europeans invited to the Blue House after he got elected.
Okay.
So I mean, so in that sense, I had a very good relationship.
Right.
The current administration is not so keen, but on the other hand, I don't know what about the next one because I know Park Geun-hye a little. I've had dinner with her with 4 or 5 people, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago in Seoul. So and discussed North Korea. So. I mean, certainly the South Koreans are always interested in knowing about my visits and what I saw or whatever.
For the benefit of the audience, Kim Daejung, Mr. Ford talked about, was a longtime political activist, nearly eliminated by Park Chung-hee when he was president. Later became president of Korea, and he unfortunately died a couple years ago.
Yeah, he got the Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, yeah, and he got the Nobel Peace Prize.
But he was in jail. I mean, I remember I helped to arrange for him to be invited to speak to the European Parliament, the first Asian leader to ever do that. And one of my colleagues sort of said, "Doesn't he walk funny?" And I explained that the reason he did walk funny, the reason he walked funny was that he'd been tortured while he'd been in, he'd spent years and years in prison. And,
probably lucky he could walk at all.
Yeah, and well, there were several attempts to kill him by the South Korean, if you want, authorities. I mean, on one occasion, he was on a boat with concrete blocks tied around his feet when the U.S. intervened to stop him being thrown overboard.
Right. I think Japan helped out with that.
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
didn't they?
yeah. He was kidnapped from Japan.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, he was a very courageous person, and in a sense, the only person he can be compared with is Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
He spent years and years in prison, and when he came out, basically, like Mandela, forgave everybody.
Yeah, I know, that's really quite something. I admire people who can do that. I can hardly go without a cup of coffee for 2 hours, let alone jail for 25 years.
Yeah.
So, okay, where do you really see the focus of leadership in North Korea? Is it shared between Kim Jong Un and his uncle? They say there were theories, at least his aunt was part of the leadership, but I hear more and more stories now that she's really not very active in leadership. She has some drinking problem, I've heard as well. And my perception is it's between Kim Jong Un and his uncle. But what's your take? You're much closer to it than any
but
of
I
us.
think it's impossible to tell. I mean, frankly, all I would say is the evidence seems to be there that there is more of a collective rather than charismatic leadership at the top. When in 2010, after the party congress, people got various new posts. There are three key institutions. There's the party, there's the military, and there's the, if you want, the state apparatus. Several people, including the aunt and the uncle, got two senior posts, but not three. The only one who got posts everywhere was Kim Jong Un. As I said, I think there is more of a collective leadership. The trouble is, I don't know who knows whether someone's got a drink problem or not, but even if they have, it doesn't stop them having a rather influential role. Winston Churchill, in today's terms, had a serious drink problem, but he was a rather effective leader of the United Kingdom, who rarely went to sleep sober during the war years. So I mean, I think it's Kim Jong Un who is the first amongst equals, but there are people around who are working with him and for him.
His elder brother, who got sidelined, does he pose any threat?
No. I mean, his elder brother is now a playboy living in Macau.
Okay.
He wouldn't pose a threat. I guess he's the middle brother. Kim Jong Un is the youngest. I mean, as far as I'm aware, is still in Pyongyang.
The middle brother.
Well, you've got three. You've got the elder brother.
Okay, he's the one in Macau.
Yeah,
okay.
And then you've got a middle brother.
Okay.
Who is in Pyongyang and was talked about as a leader very briefly, but was passed over in favor of Kim Jong Un. I guess he's around, and someone might use him. But I mean, it seems to me that there's fairly good control at the moment, and I don't see the advantages you're going to get from swapping the leader.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess it depends in some ways just how well he purged the army. It's not only Vice Marshal Rhee, but it's other generals, you know.
Well, I
allied
mean,
with him.
I mean, all the evidence seems to be we're talking about one person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no stories that I've seen. I mean, North Korea is a very difficult place to deal with, even for someone like me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, we're talking about one individual going. We're not talking about a whole, you know, a faction being purged.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, I mean, basically in 1945, there were, you know, there were 4 communist factions, and successively, you know, the South Korean communists went first, and then then the Russians, and then the Chinese.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a if you want, a partisan faction led by Kim Il Sung, and then there was the people who'd stayed who were in the south, who'd been the people on the ground, many of whom were, because of the Japanese colonial experience, were seen to be compromised. And then there was a group that had been off in the Soviet Union, and a group that had been off in Yan'an and elsewhere with Mao Zedong, and those factions were successively purged. Now, what we're talking about at the moment is there's no evidence we're talking about a large-scale purging. We're talking about one individual.
Okay.
Who had risen fairly sharply, now disappearing.
Right.
I mean, but let's also be clear that Jang Song-tek was purged about 7 years ago. The uncle, who's now, in a sense, possibly acting as almost a regent, he was purged because he took a rather negative line on economic reform, and saw the error of his ways and came back an enthusiast.
Are we looking at a North Korean style Deng Xiaoping there?
Well, too soon
Purge for his economic ideas. That sounds a little bit like Deng Xiaoping.
Yeah, but he was purged because he was against economic reform, not because he was in favour, and came back.
Okay. Okay, at that time he was against it.
Yeah.
Okay, because now they seem
That's
to
how it was
suggest
perceived.
he's for it.
Well, he came back, convinced of. I mean, we're not talking. I don't think about Deng Xiaoping yet, but we're talking about someone who sees the need to modernise. I think is the word the North Koreans prefer to use, the economy.
Okay, let's shift our conversation here a little bit. What's the European strategic view of Asia?
Oh,
that's a rather broad question. I realize.
I mean, it's a lot of Asia.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
I mean, the European Union is increasingly realizing the importance of Asia. We've just done a free trade agreement, which is now in force and ratified, with the Republic of Korea,
Right.
where we literally, in the last few days, announced that we plan to open negotiations with Japan on a free trade agreement. Though, I mean, if it's successful, I mean, everybody apart from the car industry is in favour. Though there is some scepticism about whether Japan is prepared to move in getting rid of the non-tariff barriers that impede trade. Although, in a sense, we're a better game in town for your average Japanese than the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Why is that?
Well, because the European Union, we don't grow rice. Well, not at any quantity. So we don't have what we're demanding won't have the same devastating effect on Japanese agriculture as what will have to be demanded by the likes of Australia and the US. So agriculture will be badly shaken up by a deal with the EU, where it will be destroyed by any reasonable deal with TPP. Unless the TPP is more of more political than we think it is. I mean, the Chinese actually view the TPP as a political deal to encircle them. But it seems to me it's most people see it as a trade deal. So we've got that. China is seen as a big threat. The European Union, I guess, compared to the US, we're we're more positive, but there will be a general perception that the European Union is rather sceptical about China, partly because of the Tibet lobby and the and the Taiwan lobby. And also issues around human rights. I mean, there are serious human rights problems in China. But
tell me about the Taiwan lobby in the EU.
Well, it's like yours, but smaller and weaker, but not insignificant.
It seems to, I follow the Taiwan news pretty closely, and they often talk about the EU. There seems to be some people that are quite friendly towards Taiwan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, it's the same model as with the Taiwan lobby here. But I mean, it's, they certainly assiduously court members of the European Parliament. There's a bit of a push at the moment about possibly opening negotiations for free trade agreement between the European Union
question exactly,
and Taiwan. I think I've written on this. I think it's not impossible, but it would have to be a kind of three-way deal. You'd have to get you have to get mainland permission. Yeah. And you can get mainland permission, I think. I mean, there are things that the mainland want. In the sense of market economy status. They're going to get market economy status in 2016 anyway. We could bring it in early. There's the arms embargo. I mean, frankly, in my view, the arms embargo is a bit of a nonsense. Not because we want to sell arms to China, let me be clear.
Okay.
But the European Union actually has a situation where we name 3 countries in the world as being so awful that we have an arms embargo against them. One is China, second one is Zimbabwe, and the third one is Burma.
Oh, Burma's off the list
now.
Burma,
well, it's not off the list yet, but yes, it will come off the list. Zimbabwe. We have an arms export policy that would prevent us exporting any arms to any of those countries anyway, in terms of for other reasons. So it will be perfectly possible for us to lift the embargo without suggesting that China will be able to buy any arms from the European Union because of the conditions we have, which we oppose on large numbers of countries around the world where we're suspicious as to what their motives might be for buying them.
And so basically what you're saying is there are 2 pieces of legislation or 2 policies that prohibit the shipment of arms to China. So there's duplication, in other words.
Well, yeah, there's a general policy on arms sales that will prevent us selling anything to China.
Okay. And
then on top of that, there is this arms embargo that was rightly introduced after Tiananmen Square, but things have moved on a little since then. Yeah. And so I'm actually in favour of lifting the embargo. But the point being, it's those kind of is that kind of three-way deal that could be done that would enable China not to block a free trade agreement between the European Union and Taiwan, which has got advantages for China anyway, because of course that would enable some Chinese products, some Chinese components to actually benefit from that FTA.
Chinese, in which respect?
Well, there's a lot of components go into what's manufactured in Taiwan.
Okay.
Components are made in China. If Taiwan's selling more of these things to anybody, they're buying more from the mainland to put in them.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Does the world worry too much about the Chinese reaction to anything? It seems like everybody's worried about the Chinese these days. Well, we do this, the Chinese might not like it. We do this, the Chinese might not like it.
Well, I mean, we should be. I mean, that shouldn't stop us necessarily doing things, but clearly, China is a powerful economic player in the world. It's increasingly a powerful political player, and it is sensible to take their reaction into account when making decisions. I mean, it would be crazy not to. That said, it doesn't mean to say you don't necessarily make those decisions, but why would you want to avoid having a rational debate with yourself about, if I do this, how will the US react? How will China react? How will I mean, some of the other, the BRICS. I mean, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But though, to be fair, I mean, the big BRIC is China. Okay. I mean, the others aren't. They're all probably an order of magnitude smaller.
Glyn, we're coming down to our last minute and a half here. Just maybe this is a little bit of an unfair question to pop on you at the end, but if you could give me a brief answer. Is China going to be a big help in the Eurozone, helping out the Eurozone? Do you expect much help from China?
We expect some assistance from China in their own interests. I mean, one of the reasons that Chinese growth is going down to levels that we would give our right arms for, 7-8% from
Right.
from 10-11%, is because of a slackening of demand from the US and Europe.
Right.
That means that it's in the Chinese interest for the European economy to be recovering,
Okay.
and to not help and assist at all would be to cut off your nose to spite your face. So we certainly expect Chinese interest there. Sometimes I think the problem is less with the Chinese than with the Europeans, who continue, as I said, to have this rather negative view of China, aided and abetted by the Taiwan, the Tibet lobby, and the human rights lobby, that together actually put China into a difficult place with the EU.
Thanks for joining us again. It's great to have you.